Hello and welcome to part 10 of the Django project building a simple blog. So in the previous tutorial we created a favorites feature for users to add their favorite posts to their favorites list. So we utilized a URL system and the page had to refresh in order to make that feature work. So here we're going to go and now build a like system utilizing AJAX. So it's going to look a little bit more seamless, so we won't have to refresh the page to actually perform an action. So this is a very simple process again. It's going to be very similar to the previous tutorial. We're going to need to make a new model field to facilitate this new feature. Then we're going to update the template, and I've made a new template for this building the blog series. And then we're going to create a new URL and then develop the view. So like I said, I've updated some of the graphics for this building the blog series now, and we now see that our post looks a little bit more like a real post in a blog. So on the right hand side, you'll notice also that I've updated the graphics here for the add to favorites feature. So when I click on here, a little tick appears. So these are just Bootstrap icons that you can get from the Bootstrap website. And when you are saved, remember that when we did save the post, it goes to our users saved posts and we can remove them. So that was in the previous tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to make this like button here. So when the user clicks on it, it literally just adds a new like to that post. And of course, if we refresh the post, it stays there. In this tutorial, we'll go ahead and just set it up so if the user clicks on it again, it just removes their like from that post. So we'll start off as we always do in this series by utilizing the previous code from the previous tutorial. If you don't have a copy of it and you want to start from here, then just have a look in the description. You can download it. There's also a video on how to get it started. When you do start the code from the previous tutorial, this is where we're starting. This is the code. This is where we left off in the previous tutorial. So we had a post and we had an add to favorites button. You've seen in the preview that I've updated that, and also the code here I've updated with the different fonts we're utilizing now. So we'll go ahead and add that into this tutorial and we'll go ahead and make those changes. I won't go through every line of styling because our focus here is on Django predominantly, but I'll give you an overview of what's happening, and the code is in the repository, the code repository, which you'll find a link to in the description of this video. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, we're going to create our new fields in our model to facilitate this like system. So first of all, then you need to head over to the blog. So we need to adapt the blog model. And inside of here, you'll see that we've got a growing post model right here. And then in the previous tutorial, we created the favorites field. So now we're going to do a very similar thing, building another many-to-many field, connecting the likes to the users. So what we're trying to do here is that we're going to create a new field that's going to connect a like field to the users field so that we can store which users have actually liked this post. So that's useful because we can, when we open the post, we can see if the users liked it or not, and we can then perform an action based upon whether they have liked it or not. So we might want to change the graphics based upon whether they've liked the post or not. Okay, so inside of the blog models, there's three things I'm going to add. First is an image caption. So I want to just add a facility where I can attribute the image. So I'm just going to make a little character field here with max length of 100 with the default of photo by blog. So here I can, if I'm using an image in my blog, I just want to attribute someone's image, I can just utilize that field. So that's just a bit of a sidetrack, but I've added that to the blog now. So down here you can see we've got on line 47 and 48, we're going to add two new fields. First is the likes field. So this is the connection that we're building, the many-to-many connection between the post and the users. So I'm going to be able to capture which users have liked this post. And like I said, I can use that to perform different actions. Secondly, I'm going to create this like count field. It's just going to be an integer, and I'm going to save how many times someone has liked this post. So that's just an additional feature, and we'll have a look at how we can update that utilizing a query. So you can just go ahead and make migrations and migrate. So the manage by migrations, oh, I spelled that wrong, need an S. And then you see that we're going to add 3 new fields, and then we can go ahead and just migrate. And there we go. So next up is then updating the template. So we're going to add a new icon. Well, we're going to make a few changes to our template. As you've seen, I've added a new styling to this single post. So we'll do that, and in addition to that, we'll add the functionality for our like system. So now we need to head over to the templates. I just close that down. The templates, and we then need to select the blog and then the single page. So let's first of all, I'm just going to add some more styling. So I'm not using a style sheet here, simply so that you can see what styling am I using on this page. So I've imported some fonts here from Google Fonts. We're going to be utilizing this on the single page. I've overridden some of the Bootstrap facilities here. So H1 here, you can see that I'm going to use in PT Serif font, and H2 as well. I'm overriding with a little bit of letter spacing and font weights and so on. Also the P tags, I'm updating to utilize a new font and a line height and so on. And this was there before. And then we're going to be utilizing an avatar for the user. As you saw in the preview, we have like the user of the post image, and then just creating some smaller text here. So I've just added some styling for that. Okay, so I've added this new structure here, but what's important, and to focus on this like system, is I've added 2 items. So first of all, I've added this span here with an ID of like count, and within here, I'm just gathering the post data, and inside of that, we should now have a like count. So in the model, remember we created a like count or like counter. So I'm just basically extracting that information from the post data, and I'm going to put it right there. So next up, I created a button. This could just be a link. I've just created a button for this, and you can see that I'm wrapping this around, or I'm utilizing the Bootstrap facilities here, text dark. I'm making it into a button, into a link. I've given it a border of 0 and just removing all the Bootstrap styling, so button outline light, because Bootstrap normally has some sort of shading around buttons, so that just removes that. And inside of that, you can see I've created a value. So this is important. So I'm making a button here, which I'm going to submit, and I've hard-coded the value, which is the post ID. Because what's going to happen with AJAX is we're going to send a request to the server, and we're going to send the actual post ID along with that request. And then we'll use that ID to actually update the correct post so that we know which post we're actually liking. So you can see that I'm using this SVG. If you want to access that, just head over to Bootstrap and go to icons. There's a whole list of different icons here. Just search for heart. You can see that I'm utilizing this one here. So I've just copied the code right here, and I'm utilizing that. I have made a few changes, just the width and the height. So I've just scaled that slightly, and I've just lined things up using padding 0 as well. Okay, so we created this button. It's got an ID, so we can utilize this now as a button and detect whether someone's clicked on it. So what we're going to do now is go over to the AJAX. We're going to detect based upon if someone clicks on this button. Remember, we're going to use this ID like button, and remember that the value that we're going to capture from this button is the post ID. Okay, so at the bottom of the page here, we've below this is the code, or the JavaScript for the comment system that we built in a previous tutorial. So underneath that, we created this new set here. So we are using jQuery. So with jQuery, the code's going to look slightly different from vanilla JavaScript. And in addition to that, if you're using the Bootstrap template, you need to remember that I think the default template doesn't have the correct jQuery version. So what you're going to need to do here is go over to your base template, or in my case, it's the base template. At the bottom, normally the Bootstrap template comes with a load of scripts here. So what we're going to need to do is just remove the jQuery at the bottom here, because we're using the slim min, and that the slim doesn't come with the AJAX functionality. So we just need to remove that, and then we need to update that with a new version, and we need to add it before we actually run the code. So we're going to need to run it up the top here. So we just drop it in there. Okay, so this is 3.4.1 jQuery min, which does include the AJAX functionality. Okay, so heading back to the single page. So now we can go ahead and create some AJAX, or an AJAX call. So we go ahead and we say, okay, look in this document, and then on click. Now that is a little bit broad potentially. We might want to refactor this later on, but we're saying on click where the ID equals like button. So remember the button we created? We gave it an ID of like button. So when someone clicks on that button, we're going to perform an action. So the action is we're going to create an AJAX call. So we're going to create a post type. So we're going to send a post request, and then we define the URL that we're going to send this data to. So after this, we'll create a new URL for this, and we're going to call that like. So we're going to send that data to there. Obviously, the URL is going to be connected to our view, which is going to perform all the logic. Okay, so next up, we're then going to send them data across. So what we're going to do is send the value that we left in the like button. And remember, that's the post ID. So we're going to send the post ID to the view where we can then perform some actions. So because we're sending a post, we're going to need our CSRF token. So we set that up and send that across as well as the data. And then we then send it off the action post. Okay, so that data is now being sent across. So let's now go ahead and create a new URL, and we'll come back and have a look at the code when the data returns. Okay, so remember we're sending it to accounts, so we need to open up the accounts and go to the URLs. So we're now going to just add a new URL for that. Okay, so it's a really simple one. Let's just add it below the favorites. You can see here that we're just going to add a path to like, and then that's going to be the views.like, and then give the name of like. So just remember in the singles here, we're referencing that name like right there. So that's how we know to include this path right here. And that's how we're kind of injecting or utilizing that URL. So now we have the URL, we can now go into the, remove that. So we can now go into the accounts and have a look at the views. So now we need to build a new view for this like system. So in order to actually like a post, the user has to be logged in. So we're going to use the login required decorator again. Just make sure that you've imported that in. So I've imported it in right here. So now we're going to create the view. So this is going to be a very simplistic view. I just wanted to go through the logic here, and we'll spend some time later in another tutorial looking at how we can improve this, potentially performance-wise. So let's create a new function here, or a new view. So we're going to call this like. So first of all, we're going to check to see if the action has been performed. So we're going to say if request post.getAction equals post, which it should do. Then we're going to set up a new variable called results, because we want to return the results back. So what we want to return back to the user is the updated number of the amount of likes that post has had. So we just create that placeholder for that, and then we go ahead and actually perform a query to find the post data based upon the post that the user is trying to like. So here we create a new variable. We just create that into an integer. It's going to be a number. And then request.post.get post ID. So that was the data that we sent across in AJAX, the post ID. So that matches up with, where are we? That matches up with the data here called post ID. So that's what we're matching up here. Remember, we're putting the value inside of that, which is the value that we injected in the button. So we're capturing the data it's inside of here, and then we're putting it into this ID variable. So that's going to hold the ID of the post. So now we have that, we can actually run the query, So we're going to use get object or 404. Just make sure that you've imported that into your project up the top here. So we're going to do that, and we're going to get the post that's equal to the ID of the ID that we sent across from AJAX. So now we have that individual post. Now we can perform an action. So what we want to do now is obviously we want to add on a new like or remove a like from the existing amount of likes the post has. And we also want to add the user to the likes list so that we can add up, or we can see who's actually liked the post. So two operations here. So the first one here is we're going to create an if statement. What we're doing here is we're checking to see if the user has already liked the post. So we specifically select the likes field and we run a filter. So here we're going to check the ID, so the user ID. If someone's logged in, we'll be able to capture their ID. If it matches an ID that's already inside of this likes field, then we're going to create a match. It's going to exist. So if it does exist, what we're going to do is we're going to remove them from the likes list in the table. So we now removed them so they aren't liking this post anymore. We also get the post like data, the like count data that we set up. Remember, we made a like count field in the database, and we basically just take one away from it. So we're performing two actions. We remove them from the likes field, and we also then take away a number, or remove one away from the current amount of likes the post has. So once we've done that, we can then create a new variable here, and we're going to populate that with the current amount of likes the post has. So remember here what we're doing, that the data is in memory. Okay, so this post data is memory. We've removed, we've gone into that those fields, and we've removed one already from the amount of likes. So now we can get the updated amount and store it in the result, and we'll pass that back to the user or to the page. So we'll pass that back in a minute. So we've got that, and now we can save the data. So like I was suggesting, this isn't the most efficient way, particularly when you're creating or doing calculations on a table. I just wanted to show you some basic logic for this. So it's worth having a look at F expressions. So have a read through that and see if you can adapt this to use F expressions. It's a lot more efficient and safer to utilize than the code that I'm going to be utilizing and showing here. But like I said, I just wanted to show you the basic flow to get you an understanding of what's happening. Okay, so now we've got that in place, we're now running else. So this else represents if the user hasn't liked this post before. So we've got this if statement here. So now we're saying, well, if they haven't liked it, we're going to do something else. So what we're going to do here is say post likes add request user. So we're now going to add them to the field. And then in addition to that, we're going to get the likes count and add 1 to it. And then obviously save that in our variable called result. And now we have the new updated likes amounts for that post. And then we go ahead and save. Okay, so now we've done that. Now we're going to return something. So based upon the current position or the current user state, whether they have liked it or not before, we're now going to return the result. So this result that we're returning is either going to be +1 to the post count or -1 to the post count. Okay, so now we've got that logic in place, we can now go back to the single page and we can have a look at the success. So here we set up the post, the AJAX post. So now we've got an action, which is the success. So if we do have a successful return from the call, then we can now do something with it. So what we do is that the data appears in this JSON variable here, which you can change. I've just called it JSON. So our data returned from the view, which is obviously the result number, has been returned here in JSON. So what I can do now is I can update the light count element. So what I'm doing here, if I just zoom up right here, go to the top, we've got an ID here called light count, and when the page initially runs, it puts the light count amount in there. So maybe 10 likes or 100 likes or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this element and we're going to update it with the new amount. So traveling back down here again, you can see that what I'm doing here is document.getElement by ID. So it's called light count, the ID in that span. And then I'm going to get the inner HTML and then update it with the result. So I go inside of a JSON data that's returned. I've referred to it as JSON. And then go inside of that data and I specifically pick out the result, which should be the new number of the amount of likes the post has had. And that's going to then inject this number into that span at the top. Okay, so you can also log it as well if you want to see what's being returned. And there's an error here if you want to create something there. So that's the main functionality of this. We've pressed the button, we've sent a method across, we've dealt with the functionality of adding the user or removing the user, and then adding to that count. Okay, so next up, this is just a follow-on from the previous tutorial, but if you remember, we've created this area here where only users who are authenticated will see. So this code will only run here if the user is authenticated, they're logged in. So what we've done here is I've just extended it with a new element here. And inside of this, as I told you earlier, we've got the items here for that icon, for the heart icon, and also for the number system. So we can only see this item if we're logged in. Now, we obviously want to see this feature if we aren't logged in. So this is an if statement here. So if we travel down here, we've got the else. So if they aren't logged in, we're going to perform this action. So what we're doing here is we've just copied and pasted the code, but this time what we've done is that we've set it up as a link. So I just wanted to show you that you could set it up as a button or a link. So now I've set it up as a link. I've added the accounts register link like I did with the previous icon, so that when users aren't logged in but they press the heart icon, the like button, then they will get taken to the register page. They will then register, hopefully, and then they can start liking your posts. So have a look at the code there's a link in the description to the code. Have a look at this code. Have a look at the flow, the ifs, because there's another if here. So this is just a nested if. Notice that we have else and then we end that specific if. And this else then represents the first if here, if you're a little bit confused or new to programming. Okay, so let's go ahead back into our system. I'll refresh. I probably haven't turned the server on. Nope. Okay, let's turn the server on. Maybe there's an error. No. So I run the server. We're all okay. And I refresh. You can see that I've got all the new functionality here. Notice there's a few issues here. We'll deal with those in a second. So I'm not logged in. And you can see that I've got access to these buttons. I press them. It takes me to create account. Similar to the add bookmark or add to favorites, it takes me to create account. Okay, so that function is working okay. So let's go ahead and log in as admin and admin. So I don't currently have any saved posts. Nope. Okay, so let's go ahead and save the post. Just make sure it's working. Yep, that looks like it's okay. So now let's go ahead and like this. And it's not working. And I just remembered why that is. So let's go back because I've forgotten something here. So notice that we didn't receive any really error messages. If I go into the console Actually, in fact, there is. Apologies. This is really simple. So the name error is name JSON response is not defined. So this is a really simple one to fix. I'm happy to show you the errors rather than me just skip them and just fix it and tell you, simply because you're going to receive errors. So something like this, if you name JSON response is not defined, the first thing you can do is have a look at the views, and the JSON response requires an add-in. So we need to add this feature in. So what we're going to need to do from Django HTTP, we're going to need to add in the JSON response. So let's go ahead and do that and make sure you save. Let's just go back to the page and press the button, and there we go. So if I press it once, obviously it goes up. If I press it again, remember that I'll be saved to the likes table. So it recognizes I am saved, and then obviously it will take one off. So there we go. So that's all now working okay. Okay, so apologies for looping around, but I just want to summarize what's happened here. So when the user isn't logged in, they will see the buttons and get taken to the login page where they have to register, or log in. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, if someone is logged in and they haven't liked before, then as soon as they press the button, they'll be added to the table. Their user ID will be added to the table of likes for this particular post, and this number here will get incremented. So that was a new field that we created, remember, in the model, in the blogs model, we created two fields. So the like count will be added, or one will be added to it. Obviously, then when they click on this again, we'll do two things. Remember, we remove them from the likes table, and we also then take one away from the like count. Okay, so hopefully you got to the end. If you have, thank you very much. Hopefully there was something new that you've learnt. So this was a slightly different approach to presenting code for you. There was a lot of assumption there. I didn't cover every single style element. That would take a long time, and then really this is a Django project, so I try and concentrate on the Django. If that isn't something you like, then please let me know. If you are stuck with the code, if you're completely new and you're trying to develop this and there's just too much code here and you're trying to work out what's going on, maybe I can develop another tutorial which breaks things down a little bit more. So hopefully you're in control, so please let me know what you need, what you like, and I'll try to accommodate you as best as possible. So next up, we're going to have a look at, hopefully a fairly quick one. We'll have a look at media and static, and how to serve both static and media in the same project. So static files are things like CSS pages and images, similar to the media folder that we've already covered. So we are still working in a development environment, so the setup is slightly different. But as you imagine, once you actually deploy this to the web, your media folder or your static folder with your static files, that potentially is going to be saved in the cloud somewhere. Maybe we start utilizing Amazon cloud services and so on to kind of serve those type of images and those media types to your project. So I'm just rambling on, but there we go. So we've built a like feature with AJAX inside of our blog. And last point, we will iterate the code. So we'll look at this again, we'll look at improving on it, especially F expressions. And once we have a look at that in a separate tutorial, we'll then implement it within our blog.